We're part 2 of Christ's End Time Battle Plan. And we started off this morning by seeing the fact that there is such a plan. And we're going to, as we go into even other parts, probably won't get there tonight, but see that this plan is written in His Word. As a matter of fact, we have looked at several places where it says He's going to end it here on the Mount of Olives. Then we saw where it's going to begin, and God's going to go forth from that point, and He's already got a route that's picked out. As a matter of fact, as we noted, He's been through this before, in exactly the same place, and He's going to do it again in exactly the same way. We'll see that from this psalm here in Psalm 68. And the importance of this is understanding that Jesus Christ has a purpose when He comes back, and that is to kill the enemies of Israel, take back the land, and rescue the remnant. And at this point, the concentration of the remnant will be around the land of Israel. And then, as a matter of fact, the concentration of the armies of the world are going to be around there, because He intends to gather them around Jerusalem for this great end-time confrontation. But He's not just going to come and have one battle. He's going to have a series of battles in a military campaign. It's going to start in the south and end in the north. It's going to start in the Red Sea and go up to the east of the Jordan River, cross over, and then go up the valley of Jehoshaphat and go over then to the hill of Megiddo. That, in fact, is where the Battle of Armageddon is going to be fought. And there'll be hundreds of miles of territory, millions upon millions of soldiers. Who knows how many of the remnant will be there. But the remnant's going to flee. They'll flee north, they'll flee south, and some will even end up going to Egypt. And we're going to then come to understand why He dries up many of these bodies of water. And it's actually for the remnant. He's going to make a highway. It's called the Highway of Holiness. And it's going to come from the south and go all the way to the north and unite Syria with Egypt. And right in the middle is going to be His crown jewel, and that is the nation of Israel. So those are the things we've got coming by way of attractions. But we'll not be there till next week. And especially want you to, it's really fascinating. I guess I haven't appreciated until late how much God says about large bodies of water and judging them. And the reason that He judges them, we've always focused on the land, but the Word of God contains a whole lot about bodies of water, especially those surrounding His decreed place, Israel. Now, let's get started here by going back to verse number 1 of Psalm 68. And we mentioned this morning that what David is doing here in this very first verse is quoting something that we'll see Moses started. And that's that he is going to ask God to more or less get up, awaken, sound the trumpet, get the troops to going in their line and begin marching toward the enemy. So it says, let God arise. Let His enemies be scattered. Let them also that hate Him flee before Him. Time and again, when it talks about Christ coming back, it talks about the enemy seeing Him, and there's a fire that goes before Him, and they're going to begin to run from this fire, but they just can't outrun the Lord Jesus Christ. And eventually, what was the Garden of Eden ahead, you look back and it's all scorched. It's got a scorched earth policy. But everybody that's running in front of that fire finally is overtaken and consumed. And it's a terrible way to die, but that's what they have in store for them. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away, as wax melts before the fire. We're going to see something very interesting along this journey here about the highways that God takes. This highway of holiness is actually going to be split in two. And it's going to have two markers on it through the kingdom. Two markers that are very important. One of them has to do with the burning fire. A fire that he's going to start at a certain place, a geographical location, on earth near Israel. And we've studied this before about where the lake of fire is located. He tells us exactly where it's going to be, and that he's going to start the fire on earth with these enemies, and it's going to burn down to the lowest hell, and hell is going to surface at that point, and you're going to be able to look in, and it's right along the way of the King's Highway there that's turned into the way of holiness. The second marker is on the western side, where this route comes up out of Egypt and splits east and west of Israel. There's the great trunk road, or the way of the passers-by. And there he is going to bury Gog and the multitudes of Gog. And it is going to be a cemetery right by that way. So that if you go up one way, you're going to look, and there is the lake of fire through all the kingdom. If you go up the other way, you're going to look, and there are the bodies of the multitude of Gog. And they stand as a testimony to the victory of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I want you to see that it's very, very exciting what this is and why he does it. Because he doesn't just pick at random a certain route. He comes through the Red Sea, through Sinai, and he comes up, and he is going to go by way of the Red Sea. That's another route that connects them to the King's Highway. The King's Highway takes them right east of Jordan all the way up to Damascus. From Damascus, another route splits, and it is the Great Trunk Road, or the way of the passers-by, and it goes west around Israel and connects down in Egypt with the way of the Red Sea. And so that becomes the way of holiness with these two magnificent markers of the power of Christ and his victory. The lake of fire that's functioning, and the cemetery of Hamon-Gog, or the multitudes of Gog. Anyway, let's get back here to verse number 7. O God, and here is the precedent, when you went forth before your people, when you did march through the wilderness. Now, this song here is a song for the coming remnant, because it's going to be a precedent for the remnant to look back and see, here we are in Petra, here we are in the wilderness of Sinai, here we are clear down in Egypt, way away from home, and how are we going to be rescued? How are we going to get back? God has a battle plan. And Jesus Christ is going to come back in a certain way and lead these remnant people right back home the way he led that first generation. Now, let's move on here from verse number 8. When he did this, as he marched through the wilderness, the earth shook, the heavens dropped at the presence of God, even Sinai was moved at his presence. Now, that brings us to verse 12. As he was marching through the wilderness, kings of armies did flee apace. Verse 14, when the Almighty scattered kings in it, that's a reference back to the wilderness in verse number 7. And he mentions some things. Down here at verse 17, the chariots of God are 20,000, even 1,000 of angels. Where did he gather them? In Sinai. So he comes back and he blasts the Red Sea. This is going to happen a second time. He's going to assemble his troops, the angels of the Red, right there after this battle, and they're going to begin their march through the wilderness the second time. Now, how do we know this? Come down to verse number 22. God has said something. And as he says this, I want you to see the parameters. Verse 22, the Lord said, I will bring again from Bashan. Now, Bashan is that land. If you look at Israel, you've got the Dead Sea in the south, the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee in the north, and in the Transjordan or East Jordan area, you've got Ammon, you've got Moab, you've got Edom. Edom, Moab, Ammon, in that direction. It's modern day Jordan now. But when Israel marched up, they marched through Edom, through Moab, into Ammon, and that area had what was called the land of Bashan. Now, we mentioned this morning who was there. It's one of the last big battles that Israel fought with Moses as their leader. They fought Og. And Og was the king of the giants, a man probably 13 feet tall and 6 feet wide. I mean, I would like to fit those shoulders into a suit. And he was a massive individual. But I mean, he was the leader of an army of giants. And they defeated them there, and then that's when Moses died. What happened after Moses died? Joshua took over. What did the children of Israel do? From this land, they crossed the Jordan River over into the land of Canaan. And from there, then infiltrated the land. So that's significant. It's up here. But now note the southernmost part of it, verse 22. I will bring again from Bashan, that is, he's going to duplicate what Israel did with Joshua in crossing the Jordan River. I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. So here we go, if we just retrace the steps back there to the Red Sea. And as he did it the first time, he's going to do it the second time, from the south all the way north to the east of the Jordan River. Now, let's go to another portion of Scripture here in Habakkuk chapter 3. Habakkuk. Habakkuk chapter 3. And now, I want to show you another south-north type deal where, in the very same manner, another prophet of Israel says that God is going to duplicate himself in this process. Habakkuk. We're waiting a little while until we all find out. I tell you what it does. It's challenged me to go back and rememorize, because I had it once, all of these minor prophets. Because they're tough. Verse number 2, Habakkuk speaking, and it's a prayer. And by the way, all of the prophets, Israel has 5 courses of discipline throughout history. And certain portions of Scripture fit in, like I mentioned. The Psalms is one book, but it's divided into 5 books, and all the core Psalms have to do with those 5 mandates of the Davidic covenant. But the prophets as well. Some deal with some contemporary issues for Israel, but a whole lot of them deal with the future and the remnant. So here's Habakkuk. O Lord, I have heard thy speech, and I was afraid. Revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy. That's for the future. God did a work for Israel, and then he said, when it comes time in the midst of the years, revive it. Do the very same thing. That's what he's talking about, and that is that the remnant needs mercy at this point, and while you're pouring out your wrath upon the earth, those who deserve it have taken the mark of the beast and joined with Antichrist. Would you please be merciful on the remnant, because it's the only way they're going to be saved. They'll never be delivered unless there is mercy in the midst of this consuming wrath. So now he gives the precedent. Verse 3. God came from Teman. Now, where is Teman? All the way south of the Sinai Peninsula, close to where they came across in the Red Sea and where Mount Sinai was. It's south. It encompasses what's called the Sinai Peninsula. Now, that peninsula, if I just hold my fingers up in a V like this, this stands for the one tongue of the Red Sea. This stands for what's called the Gulf of Aqaba. And the Sinai Peninsula fits right in here. Egypt is on this side, and then right up here you've got the Dead Sea and that particular Jordan River and body of water. And so Teman is all the way south in that peninsula. And you'll note it says God came from there. And the Holy One from Mount Paran. Now where is Mount Paran? All the way north to the southern edge of the land of Canaan. So what Habakkuk is saying is God marched through the wilderness from the south all the way to the north. And that's what he's going to do. And that's what the work he's asking him to revive. You worked here from south to north. Do it again. Revive what you did this next time and go from south to north in showing mercy in the midst of wrath. Now, his glory covered the heavens when this was done. The earth was full of his praise. His brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. We're just going to stop here as a by-the-by, because this is absolutely fantastic. Because it has to do with what Jesus Christ brings with him when he comes back as to this battle plan. He's holding a book in his right hand that contains this battle plan. Now the thing about this book is that it is scintillating. It is bright. And he's got it in his hand, and even though he's clenching it tight, it is so bright and fiery that it's got rays coming out of it. And so as his hand is coming towards his enemies, or in a matter of punching it, it looks like this raging bull is coming toward them with these horns. And that's the concept. The bull is lowering its head, and these horns are coming right at his enemies, and he's about to knock their lights out, put their lights out, knock their socks off. Whatever type of illustration, whatever you want to say there, you get the picture. But it's in his hand, and he's coming toward them, and he's got it covered, but he can't cover the brilliance of what he's holding in his hand, and it's his strength. No, it says, and there in his hand was the hiding of his power. But what did he have there? Hold your place here, because we're going to come back and come to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 33. This is what Jesus Christ holds in his hand that gives him the right and the power to destroy his enemies. Chapter 33 in Deuteronomy, we're holding our place, verse number 2. Now, this is exactly what Habakkuk was quoting. Exactly. And you'll note the parameters that he traveled. The Lord came from Sinai. That's all the way south. And he rose up from Seir. Seir is a mountain or an area in Edom, all the way northeast. He shined forth from Mount Paran. That's a little bit west, northwest. So what Moses is writing is in the second book of the law. Remember, he's the one that traveled all this way too. It wasn't the easiest route through the desert. God provided. But here's another interesting thing about it. There are certain places where God allowed Israel to drink, like the waters of Merom. But before they could drink of these waters, Moses had to do something to prepare the waters from their being bitter and perhaps poisonous. Something was in those waters. As you go up, you'll note that he's going to be judging these waters. But where does Israel learn to drink? Where does Israel get its water? Do you remember what Moses did with his rod? He smote the rock. They didn't drink from the bodies of water that the other people drank from in every case. But Moses was to smite the rock. Moses was to speak to the rock. And the rock would provide the water. And Paul says they all drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Why didn't God want them near those waters? Was it just that he didn't care for that water? He wanted bottled water? He wanted his own purification system? Not so. Something was in those waters he wanted to protect Israel from. And so therefore they weren't allowed to drink at all of the watering holes along the way. They drank from the rock that followed them. That rock was Christ. Okay, well, you don't get all these tidbits, this, we aren't going to go on. We're talking about his hand. What did he have in his hand? Well, Habakkuk is quoting here, and he said he also came from Paran. Verse 2, he came with 10,000 of his saints, and from his right hand went a fiery law for them. He had the book of the law in his hand. He had the testimony of the law in his hand, and it was fiery, and it was bright. And so therefore, the law gives him his punch. They were all lawbreakers. Very first one, they made Antichrist their God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and now Christ has the right to kill his enemies, and that gives him his power. All right, let's come back then to Habakkuk 3. And the last part of verse 4 said, there in his hand was the hiding of his power, and what was in there we know to be the law. Before him went pestilence, and burning coals went before his feet. He measured the earth and so forth. The tents of Cushan and the curtains of the land of Midian, verse number 7, did tremble. These were all places along the way as he came from the south to the north. Now, let's move down to verse 10. The mountains saw you, they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed. The deep uttered his voice. I didn't mean to read this verse, but now that we're here. The deep uttered his voice and lifted up his hands on high. This is cute. I like this. I was going to wait until next week to introduce it, but while we've already read it, what does this mean? Something was in the water. And when God's presence came by, the deep said, I give up. That's what it is. I give up. Look, I'm not going to fight. I give up. And that's what it's talking about. There was something in the deep that raised his hands on high and said, hey, I can't win in this case. And as a matter of fact, if you come back up to verse number 8, Habakkuk says, was the Lord displeased against the rivers? And why did you judge these waters? Were you angry against the rivers? Was that wrath against the sea? I mean, is that the reason that you dried it up and beat the fire out of it? Why did you do that? It's because there's something in there that he wanted to address and he wanted to protect Israel from. Okay, these are coming attractions. Verse 11, the sun and the moon stood still in their habitation. At the light of your arrows they went, the shining of your glittering spear. And here's verse 12. You did march through the land in indignation. Second time, God was on the march. He had his troops with him. He was leading his troops from south to north. He was taking care of his enemies along with the stops in the way. And he was bringing his people into the land. And he's going to, as Habakkuk prays, do it again. He's going to revive the very same work and use the very same pattern to do that. Verse 13. You went forth for the salvation of your people, even for the salvation with your anointed, and wounded the head of the house of the wicked. Okay, now let's we're going to come back to Habakkuk in several instances. There are a lot of things there that we need to address. But before we do that, let's address something back by way of Moses. All right? Because all of this with David in Psalm 68 and Habakkuk in chapter 3 actually has a precedent way back in the book of Numbers. But we're going to go to Exodus 40 first. Now, here is another pattern in the overall scheme of things. In the first place, Israel had to be set in their armies. And they had to have the tabernacle with them, the Ark of the Covenant, but in the Ark was the law, the testimony. And in that testimony, there was something written regarding God's battle plan. Now, we're not going to look at this tonight. That'll be next week. Well, we've already seen he had it in his hand. And we're going to see that in the third heaven, there is a duplicate copy of this battle plan, the very thing that is going to go into the law, and into the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle. And we've already seen that he brings it back with him and he keeps it in his hand. He already delivered it to Israel once in Sinai, and he's going to have it in his hand when he comes back. And this is going to give him his power to destroy his enemies. So, verse 2 of Exodus 40. First day of the first month, you will set up the tabernacle, the tent of the congregation. And you will put therein the ark of the testimony, cover it with a veil. All right? Drop down to verse 16. Thus did Moses according to all that the Lord commanded him, so did he. It came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. They came through the Red Sea, stopped at Sinai, got all the instructions about how to construct this thing, and got the law, stayed there a year, and at the end of that year, they put it together to see if it all fit. And it did. He reared it up. Now, verse number 20. And he took and put the testimony into the ark. Now, that testimony has to do with the book of the wars of the Lord. The book that gives the battle plan. The book that contains the pattern that Jesus Christ is going to follow. And he was put in the earthly ark, in the earthly tabernacle, and ultimately the temple. And we're going to see portions in the book of Revelation where the temple of the tabernacle of the Lord is opened up in heaven. And the ark of the testimony is seen right before Jesus Christ mounts on his white stallion and goes forth to make war. Why does he need that? Because there's a duplicate copy up in heaven. What does the Bible say? Forever, O Lord, thy word is settled where? In heaven. A settled word in heaven. That means the plan has already been written. You open it up and he takes it out and in his hand, and he goes forth with that power to defeat his enemies. So, verse number 21. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle. Last part of verse 33. So Moses finished the work. Now let's read the remaining portion here. A cloud covered the tent of the congregation. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses wasn't able to get in there with this glory cloud when it filled it. But when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day and fire by night in the sight of all Israel throughout all their journeys. Okay, now let's go to Numbers chapter 10. Numbers chapter 10. And we'll start reading with verse number 11. And I want you to, again, to note here, we'll point it out in a moment, the land that was encompassed in these journeys. And something significant Moses is about to say here with regard to each of these things. Verse number 11. It came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year. The tabernacle had been set up, the glory cloud fell on it, and now it was time to get moving. Because they weren't going to stay there in Sinai for the rest of eternity. Where was Israel to be blessed? The land. What was the only way for them to get there? Cargo plane? A bus? No, they had to walk. Now, in actuality, it was only an 11-day journey that took them a little less than 40 years, but that's another story. It so happened that that day, the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle of the testimony. The children of Israel took their journeys out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. Now, what he's talking about here, it didn't rest in Paran in the journey. That was its final resting place. Its starting place was Sinai, here, south. Its resting place was up here in Paran, north. Paran's north of it, a long way north. So they first took their journey according to the commandment of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Do you remember what we read this morning when he talked about giving the shout, the command, the charge? Let's start marching. Let's start going. All right, verse 28. Thus were the journeys of the children of Israel according to their armies they set forward. They marched not just according to tribes and families, they marched according to their armies. The book of Numbers numbers men of war out of all of these various tribes. Men who had to be ready for battle. Because they were marching into enemy territory. All along the way, they had people who wanted to prevent them from getting in, and they had to fight. Now, let's just stop here for a second and think about ourselves. We're not marching to Zion, as Israel is, but we are marching to the second heaven. Do we have enemies that want to prevent us from getting there? Yes. Do we have enemies that want to keep us from claiming our possessions? Yes. They're the principalities and powers in the heavenly places. That we must, as we're going through life, that we must face, confront, and defeat. Because if they defeat us, we're stalled right at that point. We have got to defeat them if we're ever going to get in there and claim what is ours in Christ. So there's a battle going on. There's a parallel here. As Israel is marching with God leading to their possession, we are marching with God leading. But in this case, it was a much more formal thing with them marching arranged in armies. Now, verse 33. They departed from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them in the 3 days' journey, searching out a resting place for them. The cloud of the Lord was upon them by day when they went out of the camp. Now you'll remember, the cloud went up, they had to hurry up and fold up the tabernacle, put it all away, fold up their tents, and follow the cloud, and off they went. It stopped, and right there they stopped and put their camp together again, because that's where they were supposed to be. But now, note what Moses said each time they started and each time they stopped. Verse number 35. And it came to pass when the ark set forward that Moses said, Rise up, Lord. Alarm's gone off. We want you to go out here before us now. And remember, that's what Moses said. If your presence is not going to go before us, we're not going to march up. And Moses said, I'm a brave man, but I'm not a fool. We'll never beat those massive people with all of their numerical superiority, and many of them even had superior weaponry. We'll never beat them in and of ourselves, Lord, unless you rise up and go before us. So here they go. It's time for them to march. And Moses makes this declaration. Rise up, Lord. Let your enemies be scattered. Let them that hate thee flee before thee. And when it rested, he said, Return, O Lord, to the many thousands. Come and join us, Lord. It's time to rest and share together a meal at the end of the day after we've triumphed over our enemies. Now let's go back to Psalm 68. And verse number 1. What does David say? Quoting Moses, let God arise. Let his enemies be scattered. Let them also that hate him flee before them. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, the wicked perish at the presence of God. Rise up, Lord. Why? Verse number 22. Because the Lord has said. David is simply quoting Moses in a precedent, in a pattern that God had already set for Israel in getting them into the land. He's saying, Lord, I want you to do it again, because here, Lord, you said it. Lord said, I will bring them again from Bashan. I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. And so what Moses said back there, David repeats it in the Psalms. And we're going to look at them with the remaining time. Because the Psalms are for the remnant generation of Jews. And they are going to point their eyes back to this pattern. And this pattern is going to give them comfort. This pattern is going to help them endure to the end. This pattern helps them to know that as God did it one time, he's going to do it again for them in providing military victory over their enemies. Chapter 3 of Psalms. Let's just go through and look at these. Chapter 3, verse 1. What's the remnant going to say? Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they which rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there's no help for him in God. But then it talks about that God is going to be with them. Verse 6. I will not be afraid, though 10,000s of people that have set themselves round about. That's the condition of the Exodus generation, but it's especially the condition of the remnant generation. You talk about thousands of people against them here, we're talking millions upon millions. A world set against a few people in one basic geographical location. And they're round about trying to find them and kill them. So what's the remnant say? Arise, O Lord, save me. It's time. Oh my God, thou hast smitten all thine enemies upon the cheekbone, because salvation belongs unto the Lord. Your blessing of military deliverance is upon your people. It's an appeal by the remnant nation to do what God did in the first generation. Let's turn to chapter 7. Chapter 7. Verse number 6. Arise, O Lord, in thine anger. Lift up thyself because of the rage of mine enemies. Awake for me to the judgment that thou hast commanded. You see, he's already done it once, and he said, I'm going to do it again. And the remnant generation is going to say, Lord, you've already commanded it. Would you get busy with it already? Let's get on with this thing. So shall the congregation of the people compass thee about. For their sakes, therefore, return thou on high. Come on back and deliver us. Let's go to chapter 9. In verse number 19, in the very same concept here, where it says, Arise, O Lord, let not man prevail. Let the heathen be judged in your sight. Put them in fear, O Lord, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. And that's what is happening here, is the remnant cries out and God hears them. Jesus Christ gets his armies and puts the law in his hand. The fire goes before him and he begins to march out, and they see the terror that is headed their way. Then all of a sudden, their might doesn't mean so much. Their numbers don't count, because they see a force and a power that is vastly superior and that is coming to wipe them out. Chapter 10. Why standest thou far off, O Lord? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride does persecute the poor. Now, who's the poor? But those that have sold all their goods not to take the mark of the beast, the remnant. Let them be taken into devices they have imagined. The wicked boast of his heart's desire, blesses the covetous. The Lord, through the pride of his countenance, the wicked rather, will not seek after God. Come down to verse 10. He crouches and humbles himself, that the poor might fall by his strong ones. Here are all of the soldiers of Antichrist encompassing these poor people who basically have nothing. He said in his heart, God's forgotten them. He hides his face. He'll never see it. I mean, all of these years, God has not answered the cry of his people for help. It's not going to be now. Verse 12. Here's what the remnant says. Arise, O Lord. Lift up your hand. That's the right hand of his power. Forget not the humble. You've got to come back here. Verse 15. Break thou the arm of the wicked and the evil man. Seek out his wickedness till you find none, and make the Lord the king forever, because the heathen are perished out of the land. All right, come to chapter 12. And verse number 1. Chapter 12 and verse 1. It says there, help, Lord, for the godly man ceases. There is such a policy of annihilation against the believing remnant at that time, that they're being captured and killed, starved out, except for those who do find some refuge in Petra and some of these other places God has prepared, and by those Gentiles that don't take the mark of the beast and help them. That's what Matthew 25 is about. Jesus said, enter the kingdom as Gentile sheep nations. Lord, why should we go into the kingdom? Because you saw me hungry, naked, in prison, and you visited me, and you fed me, and you helped me, and you hid me. Well, Lord, when we didn't see you, and he says, when you've done it unto the least of these my brethren, you've done it to me. You see, it's the remnant, the believing remnant. When you help the remnant, you Gentiles, to be saved physically alive through the tribulation period, you have demonstrated or manifested your faith in me and in the coming kingdom, and that gets you into that particular kingdom. Because you took your life in your hand to support these believing Jews, you're saved. Okay. Verse 1, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. Verse number 5, here's what God says. For the oppression of the poor, for the sighing of the needy. This is the remnant. Lord, we just can't take any more. We're down to our last. Now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffs at him. The words of the Lord, meaning his oath. The words of the Lord are pure words. As silver tried in a furnace of fire 7 times, you will keep them, O Lord. You will preserve them. You'll keep your words, and you'll preserve them, the remnant, from generation to generation, because the wicked walk on every side when the vile men are exalted. So, he's going to keep his words, and the remnant that believes in them are going to be preserved. All right, let's see if we can look at just one other of these right at this moment. Let's go to chapter 17. Verse 6. It says, I have called upon thee, for thou wilt hear me, O God. Incline thine ear unto me, and hear my speech. Show your marvelous loving kindness, O thou that savest by thy right hand them that put their trust in thee from those that rise up against them. It's a remnant prayer. Put the battle plan in your hand, would you? Get busy with it, because they're all around us and they're closing in fast. Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me under the shadow of your wings. from the wicked that oppress me, from my deadly enemies who compass me about. They are enclosed in their own fat, their mouth they just speak proudly. That simply means that their numbers are numerous. They have compassed us in our set. They have set their eyes bowing down to the earth, like as a lion greedy of prey. They're ready to jump forth and get them. So what is the prayer? Arise, O Lord. And this has been the constant thing. What Moses said is what David says, is what these other prophets say. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down, deliver his soul from the wicked. Okay, our time is up. Our light is out. Question? Any question? Yes.
Really not what you did today, but you talked about waters, how important they were. Do you think that the waters will disappear and it'll be one landmass again instead of divided like it is now?
Not for the earthly kingdom. It says in, let me go back. With regard to the sea, that disappears in the eternal aspect of the kingdom. But it does not disappear in the dispensational, at the 1,000-year kingdom. That will still be there. But some of these bodies of water will be dried up. The beings in there will be removed, and then God will refill them, and we'll show all that. Yes, it's really fascinating. But as he did before, as he goes up, he dries up the waters. And there's a reason for it.